Today we're looking at the Voigtländer Nokton 40mm f1.2. Welcome back, hope you guys are all well. I have an exciting video for you today, hopefully, and I have a new lens. The amazing Voigtländer 40mm f1.2. This is a lens I've been tempted by for quite a while, so amazing to finally get my hands on it. That's the one that's used a Leica M-mount Voigtlander lenses for quite a while. This is going to be quite a detailed review, so first things first, what is the Voigtländer 40mm? The official name for it is the Voigtländer Nokton VM, which means Leica M-mount 40mm f1.2 lens. And here is the box, for anybody that doesn't know what a box looks like. Now I have good news and I have bad news. The good news is, obviously, I have this amazing lens. The bad news is, I have to send it back. Voigtländer UK kindly sent me the 40mm 1.2 lens to test, but this is not a sponsored video, so what I'm about to tell you is 100% honest feedback based on using existing Voigtländer lenses that I do own, and also Leica lenses, Zeiss lenses, and any other decent optics that I've got. So let's take a look in more detail. Now, to any of you new to photography, or for someone that's never used a Voigtländer lens before, these are quite different to modern lenses which you get on many other cameras. What do I mean by that? I mean this is a proper lens. This isn't the plastic resin rubbish that you get from many other manufacturers, where modern lenses don't have an aperture scale or the distance marked on the top of the lens. Many of the modern lenses being produced today are very plastic and they lack the manual controls. Casino Voigtländer, similar to Leica and Zeiss, do things properly. By that I mean this is a solid metal and glass lens, built to my eyes very similar to the quality of Leica optics. This lens gives you half aperture clicks, going from f1.2 to f22. There you can see the lens wide open at 1.2. And this is a 10 aperture blade design, giving you kind of rounder bokeh balls, and we'll look at that later on in the video. Being a Leica M-mount bayonet fit lens, this means it is rangefinder coupled, but it's worth noting if you're using a Leica M camera, Leica M cameras are only rangefinder coupled from 0.7 meters through to infinity. The Nokton 40mm 1.2 lens actually focuses as close as 0.5 meters. So what that means is, if you're using this on, say, a Leica M10, your rangefinder is only going to kind of kick in from 0.7 meters onwards. So do be careful if you're in that range between 0.7 meters to 0.5 meters, because it will look like you're in focus and you'll be out of focus. The way you get around that, if you're using, say, a Leica M10 or Leica M240, is to get yourself a EVF, electronic viewfinder, and then you can use this lens to the full potential, because you can shoot it at 0.5 meters. Which is what I've been doing. If you've not seen the Leica EVF video, I can link it below. Really useful piece of kit if you're a Leica M shooter. I guess a word of warning, if you use a Leica M8, Leica M9 or any Leica M film cameras, obviously you cannot use an EVF, so then you do really need to be careful. What I did personally was I'd set the lens to 0.7 meters and then I'd rock backwards and forwards to find my focus, and that way it would never be less than 0.7 meters, thereby being out of focus. So that's the way I would do it personally. Also, for like M shooters, this is a 40mm focal length, which means you're not going to have 40mm frame lines. If you use a Leica M3 like I was doing, just use the entire viewfinder area and that will give you the approximate 40mm kind of composition. Again, maybe less ideal for the Leica M10, Leica M240, but if you use this lens enough, you'll soon get used to your composition and kind of working between the frame lines shown in the viewfinder. Obviously, because this lens is all metal and glass, there are no electronics, so this is a full manual focus lens. Don't buy this lens hoping to get autofocus, because you won't get it. In terms of the lens design, you have like a knurled ring around the centre, and that is for your focusing. It's really nice and smooth, and there's no focus tab. I know some people love focus tabs, some people hate focus tabs. I believe you can actually get adapters to fit on any lens which will give you a focus tab, but off the shelf this doesn't have a focus tab design. Also, out of the box there is no lens hood. Again, I'll come on to that So kind of make a mental note, lens hood, because it could potentially be quite important for this lens. Okay, probably the bit you're more interested in is how does this lens kind of render the images. Now, as I say, this is a more detailed review than some of my other lens reviews, so I really tried to go to town to kind of get a full understanding of what this lens can do. Partly so I know whether to buy it or not, and partly because I've got to give it back, so I needed to do all my testing in a shorter space of time. Okay, so firstly, colour. I'd say the colours from this lens straight out of camera, if you're shooting, say, colour JPEG, are really quite saturated. They're maybe kind of like M9 kind of colours for any of you that are ever lucky enough to shoot with a Leica M9. Maybe not quite like M9 colours, but definitely much more saturated than you'll see from many other lenses. I'd say it has a slightly cooler tone to some of the Leica lenses. Personally, I compared it to the Leica Similux for colour, and the Similux was warmer, slightly warmer. So as you probably know, and if you follow my work on Flickr and Instagram and things, you know I appreciate my black and white photography. And so with that said, I never really have to be concerned about things like chromatic aberration. What is that? Where you get like a purple fringing often on the edge of highlights. Because I shoot black and white, I've never really noticed it on other lenses. But because I was trying to test this lens properly, and because I was shooting some colour, I can tell you that there is very slight chromatic aberration. I know for any of you that shoot colour, this can be fixed in post-processing in Lightroom quite easily. But I did notice it when I was kind of pixel peeping, trying to do my testing. Okay, what about flare? Now, for anybody that's kind of dabbled with vintage lenses, you'll know that you normally get kind of a veiling flare or a lower contrast image from vintage glass, and you'll get much more higher contrast images from modern glass. And also from personal experience of using a lot of vintage lenses and modern lenses, I tend to never really use a hood with a modern lens, and I do definitely consider a hood on some of the vintage lenses. So being a modern lens, I'd expect no flare, no hood needed, very boring, high contrast, can't get anything creative out of it, kind of a normal modern lens. I was quite surprised. You can get this lens to flare quite easily. I noticed when shooting the lens wide open at 1.2 and having the sun hit the glass, at certain angles you could see a reflection of the inside of the lens design and kind of the classic flare where you see kind of a half circle of colour on the corner of the image. That was one type of flare. The second type of flare was when you shoot directly at the sun and you can get kind of the veiling flare, as you call it, which is basically reduced contrast over most of the scene. Now, I guess in like a vintage lens, when that happens on a vintage lens, you have literally lost most of the detail. With the Voigtlander 1.2, you get kind of veiling flare where the sun's hitting, but then in the shadows you still manage to retain a lot of the detail. So it's kind of a hybrid between a vintage lens and a modern lens, which can be quite nice if used creatively. Now, what I noticed was in certain situations, as you stop the lens down, you'll have higher contrast and less flare. But if you don't like flare, I'd maybe recommend getting a 52mm lens hood. When I shoot black and white, I quite like the flare look, but if you're shooting colour, it might be too strong for you. Again, talking of comparing modern lenses versus vintage lenses, modern lenses tend to be clinical and boring, vintage lenses tend to be full of character and imperfect. Now, Voigtlander really excelled themselves because they managed to create a modern lens which can give a look similar to vintage lenses. If you shoot the lens at 1.2, you get a really nice kind of lower contrast, glow look to your images, which is really beautiful for things like portraits, obviously for myself. And it gives a look more similar to, say, vintage lenses, such as the, I don't know, Canon LTM lenses I've been testing, or perhaps some of the vintage Leica lenses, like a Summit 50mm 1.5. This is an example of a lens that can have like a glow effect. This lens can glow at 1.2. As you stop the lens down, the glow effect will disappear, and then the sharpness increases. And then talking of sharpness, this is a really useful lens. It is sharp enough to be used wide open at 1.2. So I shot all my portraits wide open at 1.2 if I was shooting digital. And then when I was shooting film on the Leica M3, I stopped it down to f2 just to give me a bit more sharpness. Because if you shoot digital, you can increase the sharpness a lot in post-processing. When film, I try to get it closer to as I want it in camera. So 1.2, more than sharp enough. But if I show you a series of images and just take note of the sharpness. So this is at 1.2. This is at 1.4. This is at f2. This is at f2.8. So did you see the sharpness increase and also the contrast increase, which is what you'd expect. But what's really great about this lens is at 1.2 it acts more like a vintage lens, less perfect, a bit more dreamy looking. And then as soon as you stop it down, it goes to kind of in your face, modern, super sharp, really nice lens. So you kind of get the best of both. And then in terms of the bokeh, I've always really shot lenses wide open to get the shallow depth of field. And it's only really as my photography has matured that I've realised you can still get nice bokeh at f2, f2.8, and even at f4 on certain lenses. Now because of the 10 blade design, if you're far enough away from your background, you can get nice bokeh even at say f2.8. And at f2 to f2.8 you'll have the nice balance between sharpness and higher contrast. Now what about the size? How big is this lens? If I put it back onto the CL for a second. For you Leica CL shooters, this is how small the lens is on the Leica CL. Obviously with the adapter. Now this lens weighs 315 grams, which is about 11.1 ounces. So it's not the lightest of lenses. It also has a 52mm filter thread, which means it's also not the smallest of lenses. That means it's quite a wide lens on the front end. I guess it's kind of like a short to fat barrel design. If you compare that to some of the Leica lenses, they tend to be thinner and have a smaller front end. So maybe a 46mm filter, 43mm filter, 39mm filter. So at 52mm filter, you can tell it's got quite a large kind of front element. Now for any of you that love the Voigtländer Nokton Classic 40mm 1.4, maybe you're wondering how it compares in size. Here's the Voigtländer 40mm 1.4. Here's the Voigtländer 40mm 1.2. The 1.4 is a 43mm filter thread, 52mm filter thread. And you can see the 1.4 is quite a lot smaller. And that's also a lot lighter, 175 grams, 315 grams. So getting on for half the weight. So if you don't need the 1.2, there's a strong argument that you may prefer the 1.4 version. But I'll cover that at the end of the video. Another question you may have is how much do these lenses cost? Now unlike many of my videos where the equipment I'm reviewing stopped being produced 50 years ago, this lens is actually still in production, which makes a nice change. So for that reason I can give you the price both new and used. The new price if you're buying this lens in the UK is roughly £756 and the UK distributor is Robert White. And so if you're looking at Amazon you probably won't find this lens. It'd be better to just Google Robert White and search for them, and they're kind of the main UK stockist for all Voigtländer gear. So £756 new. And then if you tend to prefer to buy used, if you look on eBay, you can pick one of these up for around about £675. So they are holding their value quite well. It shows how good the lens is. If you've not already seen the 40mm 1.4 video, I'll put a link to that below. But the 1.4 costs £487 new and around £400 used. So roughly £250 more for the 1.2 versus the 1.4. So I managed to test the 40mm 1.2 lens on 3 cameras. I shot it on the APS-C Leica CL mirrorless camera, which was definitely my preferred setup. I then shot it on a full frame Leica M240 with an EVF on the hot shoe. And then for film, as I said, I shot it on the Leica M3. So here are a series of images shot with those 3 cameras. And I was fortunate enough to work with both Stacey and Zara while I had these lenses. So I managed to test them with 2 amazing models. The photo shoot with Stacey was inside, it was dark and raining, so we didn't have much choice to do anything different. And then I managed to get outside with Zara. As I say, all these photos are shot at 1.2 because that is why I would buy the lens. And now we have some film scans shot with the Leica M3 camera on Fomapan 100 at 100. And for those of you that care, scanned on a Epson V800 flatbed scanner. So those are the photos. What was my verdict? Would I recommend the 40mm 1.2 Voigtlander lens? Absolutely, but especially in certain situations. So let's give a few scenarios. If you shoot with a Voigtländer Nokton 35mm 1.2, I'd say the 40mm 1.2 is very similar. One benefit of the 40mm versus the 35mm is the 40mm is smaller. So again, for any of you that are Leica CL fans, the 35 1.2 was my favourite lens on the Leica CL. So you can probably see the 35mm is quite a bit taller than the 40mm on the camera. If you don't already own the 35mm, highly recommend getting the 40mm 1.2 because you can shoot at 0.5 meters via the EVF to get kind of the most out of this lens. I guess kind of for my personal taste. I like the shallow depth of field look and it works really well for my portraits. If, like me, you already own the 40mm 1.4 lens, do you need the 40mm 1.2 lens? Again, it depends how you shoot. If you shoot with a Leica SL, Leica SL2, Leica CL, Leica M10 or Leica M240 with an EVF, any camera with an EVF, I'd recommend the 40mm 1.2. If you shoot with an M8, an M9, or any M camera without an EVF, or like M film cameras, I'd probably say the 40mm 1.4 is better for me personally because I can't accidentally go in the area between 0.7 meters and 0.5 meters and misfocus my shot. I'm talking from experience from using my 35mm 1.2 that if you get carried away, you can think you're in focus on a rangefinder camera and be out of focus because you've moved the lens between the 0.5 meters to 0.7 meters kind of area. If you love the look of this lens and you want to shoot it without an EVF, I'd highly recommend maybe pre-focusing to 0.7 meters and then doing like I do and rock the camera to critically focus. Obviously, most people probably shoot at 1 meter or longer, so for all of you guys, you can disregard everything I've just said. I just happen to like shooting in the close focus range for my portraits. So what does the 40mm 1.2 offer that the 40mm 1.4 doesn't offer? I'd say wide open, the 40mm 1.2 will give you a kind of a classic look, similar to the 40mm 1.4. But the big advantage of the 1.2 is, other than the fact that you can focus at 0.5 meters, as you stop the lens down, this is an extremely sharp lens. So it's kind of two lenses in one. I didn't test these lenses at 5.6 or f8, but imagine if you're stopping the lens down, get the smaller lens and it saves you carrying a heavy lens around. If you shoot in available light, the 1.2 aperture will give you that little bit extra light, so you may find that beneficial. Again, especially if you shoot an M8 or an M9. Talking from experience, you need all the light you can get on an M8 and an M9, especially if you live in dark, dull countries such as England. That's why I bought all my fast glass in the past, such as the 35 1.2, was specifically for the Leica M9, Leica M8, which weren't great at high ISO, so I needed the fast lenses. These days all the cameras go up to ISO 1 million, so you don't really need fast lenses anymore for kind of a light gathering aspect. So am I tempted by this lens? Of course I'm tempted. I do appreciate the small size of the 40mm 1.4, but I appreciate the close focus and the sharpness of the 40mm 1.2. If I did buy the 40mm 1.2, I'd potentially sell the 35 1.2 because they are reasonably similar. It's probably also worth noting that the 35mm 1.2 version 3, this is the version 2. The version 3 is smaller, so if you prefer the 35mm focal length, you may be better to look at the 35 1.2. I'd say watch my 35 1.2 video to get a rough idea, but bear in mind that the size of the version 3 is smaller and similar to the 40mm. So I guess because the 40mm isn't a kind of a favoured focal length in terms of camera design, not many cameras have the 40mm frame lines. You may find that you prefer the 35 1.2. And for anyone who's like a true 35mm shooter and you like that kind of that view of the world, again you might find you prefer the 35 to the 40. Obviously if you want something slightly longer, then the 41.2 might be exactly what you need. So hopefully I've not missed anything. I tried to cover any questions I may have personally when looking to buy this lens. So hopefully this video might have helped you guys in terms of some of the questions you may have had yourselves. If you found this video useful, please hit the like button and then maybe Voigtlander might send us a few more lenses that we can look at. So I guess think of it as a poll. Hit the like button if you want me to test more new Voigtlander lenses and we'll see how the video gets on and hopefully I can get some more lenses to show you guys. And again, finally, a big thank you to Voigtlander UK for sending me this lens. I really appreciated the opportunity to try it out. So that's all I've got for you today. Thank you for watching, and hit subscribe if you want to see more lens reviews coming soon. Finally, as always, a big thank you to my patrons. Have a great day and see you in the next video. Bye.